Hello, Bay Ridge. Welcome to another edition of After Hours. We've been starting our series on Daniel here, a couple of weeks looking at Daniel chapter 1. And today I wanted to talk about various paths to compromise. We were looking at our identity and how we need, if we're going to stand strong in exile, to maintain our identity in Christ. But there are various ways that a culture can try to use. We saw a few different ones in Daniel 1, but there are ways that are commonly happening in our culture and actually down through history in the world. The first one, there is just outright coercion. There is brute force that gets applied to try and change people, to try and get them to change their identity, to force them into compliance. We see this, for example, in the form of the exile. Daniel wasn't given a choice. He was forcibly removed from his homeland and forced to undergo this move to Babylon, and he never even apparently got to come back home again. There is outright coercion that happens, and not only being put into exile, but early church history, we see that there were all kinds of forms of persecution that would go on that were just brutal, where you forsake Christ or you're actually going to be put to death. You're going to be fed to the lions or you're going to be tortured. There is the form of coercion that is there, and it is real. And there are many places around the world today. Our church has been engaged in helping the persecuted in places like Nigeria and China and Iran and different places around the world that we see brutal persecution going on. And that is one form that can happen, and it could happen here in our own future, where we could be told you will compromise on your Christianity or you're going to actually be imprisoned or put to death. That could happen. It happens many places in the world today. It's the most brutal form, but it's also the most obvious form. Now, down one level from there is what I would refer to as re-education. This is, in other words, we're going to try and get you to think differently so that you'll just be doing what you want, but you're going to be doing what you want because we've changed the way you think. The education of Daniel was trying to do this. They were trying to reform their worldview, to get them to think differently about God and about the world around them. We actually can see this today. There are re-education camps in China. They actually call them that, and they do that not only with Christians, even with the Uyghur Muslims are doing it now. But the group that it happens to the most in the world today is Christians, because that is the most persecuted group around the globe. And some schooling and training in the U.S. attempts to do this. In other words, we're going to teach you, you can believe whatever you want in your little religious groups on Sundays, but we're going to teach you here how the world really works, what is really true, how you need to think about your identity. Now, this is still coercive because you're being forced to undergo this. It might be training at work where you have to go through this, and we'll call it things like sensitivity training, but we're actually going to teach you that the Bible is wrong, that what Christians have believed down through the ages is wrong, and you need to adopt a new way of thinking. But it's obviously less than physical coercion. It's not torture, it's not imprisonment, it's not putting someone to death. But parents, you need to think through this with your kids. Now, that includes your own educational choices with your kids. There are obviously, you could choose to homeschool. You could choose to do a classical or traditional Christian school. You could choose to do a private school of some sort. You could choose to do public schooling. But with all of them, you have to be aware and paying attention on how your kids are being taught to think. And this is true even, we did Christian school with our children and then shifted them to public school during their high school years because I actually wanted them to be exposed to wrong ideas. And I wanted to be able to kind of deprogram them day by day while they were still kind of in my sphere of influence. But whichever form you do, I had to do some deprogramming even in the Christian school. Even apart from formal education, just hanging out with friends in the neighborhood, ideas get in, and I had to be careful, think through, and work with my kids to say that's not the way we think. So I want to encourage you as parents, again, be thinking through that and working constantly. You're going to have to be constantly vigilant with your kids to see what ideas are taking root inside their hearts and minds. But the last area is sometimes what the culture will do is not physical coercion, sometimes not re-education, but rather what I would refer to as seduction. This is, we're going to try and win your loyalty or make it harder for you to say no and to stand against the tide. This is often done with material rewards and gains. It seems to be part of what was going on with the food that's going on there with Daniel. They're trying to win his loyalty. You're at the king's table. It's a sign of loyalty and joining in with the king. And you get used to this particular way of living, and it becomes a whole lot harder to say no. The early church, it was, look, if you want to do business, you have to do this pinch of incense to the emperor. The book of Revelation's got a lot about this kind of stuff. It talks about the mark of the beast to be able to buy and sell, but even more, I was reading Revelation 18 in the early parts of 19 in my Greek New Testament this past week, and you look and you see that it's speaking about as Babylon falls, Babylon the Great falls, which is really the world system. It's not the literal city of Babylon, which has been gone for a long time. It's this world system, and it's speaking how much the people are wailing and moaning, the captains of ships and the merchants and the people, so because they've done selling and buying, and they've become rich through what we're told is their spiritual adultery with Babylon. And it becomes very hard for them. Even when the judgment of God comes, all they can do is weep and wish that Babylon were back, because basically their loyalty has been bought through material means. They're not coerced. They're not re-educated. They actually, just their loyalty has been won over. And this has been the way that it is oftentimes, and we see it a lot. This is what's very common in our own country today. There are perks if you'll get with the program. It's going to cost you if you don't get the program. We're not going to make you, but you make your choice. And if you don't get with the program, there's going to be a cost. But if you do, there will be all of these rewards. Well, friends, we have to simply say that if there are financial penalties, if there is a financial cost, if there is a material cost to me being a disciple, that's a cost we're going to have to be willing to pay. Our loyalty to Jesus Christ is not for sale. It's not to be seduced away. We're going to follow no matter what. And this last method is the one that you and I are most likely to face. And it's the least overt. It's obvious if you're being thrown in jail. It's obvious if they're chopping your head off on a guillotine. It's far less obvious when they're just slowly making it easier for you to choose one way than another, because one way is going to have financial rewards and the other one's going to come at great cost. And slowly but surely over time, they seduce us. C.S. Lewis talked about the path to hell being paved with just, it's not steep things, it's a gradual slope, just little turns here and there, and pretty soon you realize the path's leading you to hell. And this is because our culture realizes honey attracts more flies than vinegar. You get a lot more done by sweetening it up. But we have to realize whether it's overt coercion, physical coercion, whether it is a mental seducing or seducing us through physical means of trying to just encourage us that life is easier this way, a faithful disciple of Jesus Christ cannot compromise. Our loyalty is not for sale. Our identity is found in Jesus Christ. And so I want to encourage you and I, as we continue this journey with Daniel, let's be asking these questions for ourselves as we're thinking through how to apply the word. It looks different than it did in Daniel's day. We don't have Nebuchadnezzar. We're not going through the exact same things. But make no mistake, the world system, our Babylon right here, is trying to get us to lose our identity, to shift, and is doing that ultimately to get us to compromise. And we have to be alert and vigilant and not allow that to happen. So friends, guard your hearts and your minds. Make sure they are staying fixed on God, His kingdom, and His word. I hope you're having a great week, and I look forward to gathering for worship again this Sunday. God bless.